Before starting any of this install, you want to make sure and disconnect your battery.
So the first thing you're going to want to do is get the car up on a rack. We do not recommend trying to install this kit without the use of a rack. So first thing you're going to want to do with the car up on the rack is take the wheels off, take the lower shock bolts out on both sides, and undo the e-brake cable there. Alright, wheels are off, so the next thing you want to do is remove the 4 upper control arm bolts. There's the 2 here and the 2 over there, and do this to both sides. Alright, so once again, the lower shock bolt is out. The upper control arm has been, all 4 bolts have been removed, and the shock body is going to stay with the frame. So leave those 2 bolts alone. The next thing you're going to want to do is remove the exhaust from the back of the headers all the way to the mufflers. And what you want to do is remove the tunnel plate as well as the 2 13 millimeter bolts here, and go ahead and remove the exhaust. Alright, the next thing you're going to want to do is get into the cabin, and we got to remove some of these panels. So the first thing, there's 3 Torx 15, so we'll go ahead and remove those. And we can set that aside, and then we're going to remove the shifter knob. Okay, and then carefully, using a flathead screwdriver, you're just going to pry in these areas. And now this panel is loose. Alright, with the center console panel loose, you're going to go ahead and lift it up and away. And there's 2 connectors on the bottom. One right here. You want to disconnect that, and also the traction switch, disconnect that, and then remove this piece away. And again, working in the center console, there are 6 10mm bolts. There's one here, there, here, and here, and then there's 2 more hiding underneath this panel, which you can just pop up with a flat blade. So remove all 6 of those. Once you've removed those 6 10mm nuts, this will be free to move, but you're going to want to disconnect this connector, the connector for the cigarette outlet, and then there's also a media connector here underneath. So go ahead and disconnect all 3 of those. Alright, with the center console out of the way, you want to remove the rubber boot. And then take off those 4 10mm bolts. Alright, with the shifter boot out of the way, you want to take the shift linkage off using a Torx 40 bit, as well as these 2 mount bolts there. Okay, so we've removed the shifter body now, and what you want to do before continuing on is tape the shift linkage to the torque tube so that it doesn't fall down, just like that. Alright, back underneath the car now. You're going to want to remove the heat shield. There's just a couple push button plastic tabs, and then there's 2 7mm bolts under here. And with that out of the way, what you want to do next is there's some clips that hold the brake lines. You want to pull the brake lines out of those clips because those are going to come down with the assembly. So there's a couple areas here where you've got clips. So take those brake lines out of those clips. Alright, next up is a little bit of disconnecting as far as the harness goes. There are 4 cutout valves total on this car. So this connector here, there's another one over here on this side, disconnect that. There are also 2 valves up higher here, So undo that connector and the one there for this valve as well. And then last but not least, there is a ground strap that connects to the frame up there. This is on the driver's side of the car. Go ahead and disconnect that. So the mufflers are going to stay with the car, and the rest of it's going to drop down a little bit. In addition to the cutout valve connectors and that ground strap that's connected to the frame at the back of the car, there is a connector here just inside the tunnel that you want to disconnect as well. That's on the passenger side of the car, and make sure that you disconnect that at this time. Alright, you're just about ready to start lowering the rear subframe. So what you want to do is get your tranny jack staged right underneath the lower cross member there, and make sure that your loom and all this auxiliary stuff is kind of out of the way. Make sure that none of that's going to get bound up. And to lower this thing, what we're going to want to do is remove, there's two 21 millimeter bolts per side. So there's 4 total. There's one there, there's another one right there, same for the other side. And then you're also going to want to loosen, this is an 18 millimeter bolt, both sides, and that's going to let this brace just come down with the rear assembly there. Alright, at this point you are now ready to start lowering the sub-assembly down. So just go real slow, maybe have a spotter or two. And what you want to do is lower this thing down until you've got about 7 inches or so, about there. And that'll be far enough to install this thing. Okay, so we've got the rear subframe lowered about 7 inches as measured from here. And what you're going to want to do is get a pogo staged up underneath the transmission. And then what we're going to do is undo the nuts for the tranny mounts on both sides. And we're going to use the pogo to hold the transmission stationary while we continue to lower the lower cross member a little bit further. And what that's going to do is give us a little more room to get on the bolts and other pieces of hardware when we go to install this brace. Okay, so we got the car taken apart. Now it's time to come inside and have a look at what comes in the box. Alright, each kit will come in a box marked with the contents. Inside, you'll find a packing list, and that has once again the quantity and contents of the kit, as well as the signature of the person who put the kit together. You also get a detailed instruction manual, and this will have all of the information that you need to install this kit successfully. And it has lots of high quality detailed pictures to make the installation a piece of cake. So these are all the pieces that you will get. All of the bracket features are 1018 steel, and then they have been zinc coated. All of the metric bolts are flange bolts, and they are also zinc coated. So no washers in this kit. There's an aluminum spacer. Again, in the instructions, it'll outline where all of this hardware goes, and some of them, this one in particular, has a certain orientation that you should install it in. Again, all clearly called out in the instructions. All hardware is included, and The tie rods will have the rod ends pre-installed on them. And also important to note when you're installing these, there's a method to adjust them to make sure that you have an equal amount of thread engagement on either side. It's important to pay mind to that when you're installing these and adjusting them for length. The brackets that go on the diff, you'll see this particular one has two pieces. It's been welded together. There's kind of this pocket here. Also this piece here. There's some cutouts here and here. This kit is designed to fit both Stingray, so base model, and Z51 package cars. The Z51 package, you will have a limited slip differential, and the cutouts in these pieces are such that they will clear the features on the casting. So they fit both base model and Z51 package. So that's the contents of the kit. Let's head back out to the car and see what it looks like when it's installed. Okay, so now we have the transmission brace installed, and the key to success is really using this pogo setup and the tranny jack to make the separation between the transmission and the lower cross member just a little bit more. What that does is allows you ample room to get in with your tools and access the hardware very easily. So I'd like to just kind of move around here and point out a couple things. When you install this, you're going to want to start at the transmission bell housing flange, remove the factory hardware, and install the lower two brackets that you see here. After those are installed, move to the upper portion of the transmission and install the main bracket up there that crosses over the whole top of the transmission. After that, move over to the passenger side and remove the factory hardware on top and install the bracket that you see here. After you've done that, move to the bottom of the diff on this side and remove the factory hardware and install this bracket that you see there. After you've done that, come over to the driver's side, remove this is M8 hardware on this side, remove that and install the upper and then followed by the lower bracket. Now what we're looking at here with this car is a base model Stingray. If you have a car with the Z51 package, then they will have a limited slip differential, and there will be some additional features that exist here that this bracket will clear. So you see a big cutout here. That's to clear a casting feature on the limited slip differential. So after you get those installed, then you can move to installing the tie rods. And there's a couple tie rods that I would just like to bring to your attention. The one on the lower side of the diff on the passenger side, insert the bolt from the inside going out. If you try to go the other way, it won't work. The transmission mount here won't allow you to get the bolt through, so just flip that piece of hardware so that it goes through in that direction. On the passenger side, the upper bracket, make sure you install, there's a 1/2 inch spacer that gets installed right here. It's an aluminum spacer, and what that does is it keeps the tie rod away from the exhaust. Once everything's installed, it'll give a little bit of clearance between the tie rod and the exhaust. So be sure to get that there. In addition to the tie rods, you will also install the crossover. So this is a threaded aluminum bar. We supply you with a flange bolt for that. That connects the left and right side of the diff together. Now, we supply, as mentioned before, a set of instructions which are very detailed. They will outline for you how to properly install and torque all of the hardware, as well as how to essentially torque the tie rods to bring the transmission together. So be sure to follow the instructions closely, and your system will be installed correctly.